Satan try to hold me down, no, I won't let it. Devil try to talking loud like he don't see the exit. Read the word and walk it out, it got my spirit two-stepping. Hey, no, I ain't perfect.
What's going on, y'all? So we're back with another video on the gospel and gaming series. Play a little bit of college football and also dive into the word a bit. So a little bit of Bible study, so to speak. And today's video is going to be on John chapter 2. I'm going to give you a brief synopsis or overview of that chapter, along with going over specific verses that I picked out myself that I think are pretty important to keep a hold of. Okay, so at the start of the chapter, Jesus himself gets invited to a wedding at Cana in Galilee. This is where we see the first sign and or miracle of Jesus. It's a sign of turning water into wine. So to give a brief overview over that, pretty much a wedding's going on, celebration is happening, and then towards the end of the wedding, or starting to like wind down, like the last few like hour or two of the wedding itself, they start to run out of wine. The people that work there or working over the wedding, they inform Jesus and his mother Mary about this incident. Pretty much, Jesus is asked to help in some way, in any way that he can. He goes about telling the workers that are working at the wedding. He goes and tells them to fill up the barrels with water. There's about 12 barrels or so. Tells them to fill them up with water. Once they fill them up with water, he then turns those 12 barrels of water into wine. They're presented to the guests at the wedding. It's deemed to be the best wine that those guests have ever had, because usually the best wine is served first and the cheaper, not as potent wine is served at the end. So this is a bit of a change on the guest part, and this also directly relates to Isaiah chapter 25, where it says, "On this mountain the Lord of hosts will make for all peoples a feast of rich food, a feast of well-aged wine, of rich food, fall of marrow, of aged wine well refined." So talking about the wine, this basically displays the generosity and the kindness of the kingdom. Jesus willingly, free willingly, tending to his children, pretty much, giving them wine when we run out, things of that nature. So basically, this first sign of turning the water into wine displays a type of generosity and kindness that the kingdom offers us. An amazing story, very insightful. And the next sign that's shown is right after that, starting in verse 13, where it talks about the Passover that's happening. The Passover that's happening for all of the Jews in Jerusalem. And Jesus and his disciples go into a temple there. And within this temple, there's a bunch of salesmen and money exchangers within that temple. So that's the same temple that's meant to be used for God's people to connect with him, in a sense, praise and worship within there, pray, have a moment in time to, immerse themselves within his presence. And within there, Jesus sees a bunch of people, selling things in there and bargaining and exchanging things within the house of the Lord. Jesus ends up taking it upon himself to run each and every single person out of there, and flipping over tables and throwing coins around, and basically just shooing everybody out of God's temple. This is where we get to another verse that I pointed out, or that I thought was very important to keep a hold of. It's actually two. It's going to be verses 16 and 17 of John 2, and it reads, "And he told those who sold the pigeons, 'Take these things away. Do not make my Father's house a house of trade.' His disciples remembered that it was written, 'Zeal for your house will consume me.'" So breaking down those two verses, obviously the first part of Jesus basically saying, don't make my Father's house a house of trade. Basically, this isn't the place for you to exchange things, whether it be money, items, whatever the case may be. This isn't the place to do that. This is the temple of God. This is where God and his people come together and bask in God's presence, giving him glory, honor, praising him, and worshiping him, like I mentioned earlier. Get all those things out of my Father's house, and don't do that here. And then the second part, with his disciples remembering that it was written, zeal for your house will consume me. For starters, to zeal is to show great enthusiasm or energy. Come with great energy, for your house will consume me. Pretty much letting whomever's reading that know that the house of the Lord is to be consumed by us as followers of Christ, as God's children. The second we step into the presence of God, the second we step into the temple, the second we step into the church, that God's presence will, consume us. We shouldn't be consumed by things, or we shouldn't be consumed by money, or whatever the case may be when we walk into the Lord's temple. Reasons for Jesus running those bargainers and those salesmen out of there is because it wasn't meant for that. It was meant to be consumed by his people, and that way we have that moment in time that we're in his temple to bask in his glory. And then lastly, come a bit down, the last verse that I took down that I thought was very interesting is verse 19, where it says, Jesus answered them, destroy this temple, and in 3 days I will raise it up. So I found that very interesting, very insightful, just for the simple fact, the first thing that came to mind was what was sort of destroyed or sort of, broken down or died and rose again in 3 days. It was Jesus himself. So that correlation between Jesus talking about the temple and stating that the leaders of that temple should destroy the temple and it be raised in 3 days, and that he'll raise it again in 3 days. The correlation is there. I found that very interesting. So started to ponder on it, started to read more into it, because the temple was originally used for God's people and him to meet and come together. Jesus is basically implying that his crucifixion and his resurrection is where the kingdom of heaven and earth will meet again. This not only foreshadows his crucifixion before we read more into it later on in the book of John, but also speaks that much more to how important his crucifixion and resurrection was for us. That's pretty much all of John chapter 2. I found that very interesting, and I loved every piece of it, and breaking down each and every single verse. I'm a bit of a digger myself, so I enjoyed that, and I hope you guys took something from this. Thank you all for watching this video. I pray that you all have an amazing day today, and as always, stay blessed.